Hello, everybody. Today is August 18th, 2022, and this is the OLM Issue Triage meeting. We will be looking at the RuckPack repository. Before we begin, are there any specific issues that the group would like to look at? Okay, on that note, we will just start diving into this and doing our best to close as many of these as we can find. All right, so we'll look at this first one. Improve Helm Provisioner README doc and perhaps the provisioner. Tested the Helm Provisioner on a I just want to very quickly go down this. Okay, Aki, it seems like you've already commented on this. Is there anything I should know about the issue?
Yeah. No, it's just minor improvement I think we need, but I'm not sure. Like at the last comment, that is a summary of the current issues. So there are at the bottom of the comment, there are 4 bullets, and then it says Helm tool version used by this operator and the provisioner, and then log message from Helm, and the error message. I think actually, yeah, I can comment. So error message is logged into the CR. So maybe it's not. I can just comment it. Then Helm, like I think the Helm, when we install, it dump the node.txt contents to the console at the end, I believe. So I don't know that is right, applicable for the operator side. So maybe he wants dump that contents into the log, but it may log messy. So I'm not sure that should be done or not. So
just as a data point, the SDK team has a Helm operator, which we actually use some of the same code that the Helm operator uses in the RuckPack plain provisioner, and we use it, I guess, also in the new Helm provisioner. That code exposes those notes such that you can put them anywhere kind of you want to when you're reconciling. And so in the Helm operator code, we actually put that in the status condition that says like installation succeeded effectively. So I think if we wanted to expose it, that would probably be the natural place to do it, because it's the message of a status condition is kind of a human-centric field and it doesn't really have an API. So we can kind of just let the provisioner stuff whatever it wants there. So in my mind, like that would, if we're going to do it, that would be the place to do it. And I think we probably could do that fairly easily if we wanted to.
So where it is? I didn't catch it.
So the Helm operator plugins library that we use.
Yeah, right. So
yes.
where it should go? I mean, you said human readable or something. Where is the location?
That's just like the status.conditions.message.
I see. Okay.
So I think like when we complete, I think we have code that's like, oh, do install or do upgrade. And then you get access to the Helm release that was produced as a result of that in that section of code. And that Helm release has a field on it that's like the .info.notes of the release. So I think what you can do is like in our code that does the upgrade or the install, you can grab that release.info.notes value and set it on the condition of the installation succeeded.
I see. Okay. Yeah, sounds reasonable.
I have some concerns about writing this message to the condition status, just size constraints. I would be surprised if we ever, Helm ever produces a log that would exceed, the
usually
limits.
Yeah, so that the nodes that usually put some instruction after the install they put there. or some release note type stuff. So yeah, the size may be big, I guess.
Just as another note on that, we've been putting that in the status conditions of the Helm operator for like 3 or 4 years. And I don't think I've seen anyone complain about that being a problem. But I also haven't been paying super close attention for the last year or so. So maybe it's come up and I'm not sure. But it might be worthwhile searching that Helm operator, the SDK or the Helm operator plugins repo to see if that's ever come up.
Okay.
Yeah. And I definitely think printing, like the Helm version and stuff to the condition or the status dot conditions makes sense, right? Like I think that information should be present if there's value add there, right?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to mention that this issue was discussed at the OLM Issue Triage meeting. Quick question. We're printing to the status dot conditions array, but what is the name of the object this would be on, or the resource?
You mean where we'd get it from?
Yeah, like what object is this on? Is this on the bundle deployment?
Yeah.
Deployment.
Yep. Okay. Okay, and then now the error messages, are we already not printing error messages? I'd assume we would be.
Only the error happens. It doesn't put any log from the Helm operation, but when error happens, that provisioner put the error message into the log.
Yeah, that's what it would do today, right? Like if is he saying that this doesn't happen?
So one thing I think maybe is important to mention here is like the log of the provisioner is not for the same persona as putting stuff in the bundle deployment, right? Like those are two different personas that are going to be consuming that. So I don't know like what Charles's goal here is, but I would imagine that like we want to expose as much as possible to the bundle deployment status somewhere, I think. And yeah, we can log it too, but it seems like that if you create a bundle deployment with the Helm provisioner and something goes wrong, you might not have access to go and look at the logs of the Helm provisioner. You might just only have access to view that bundle deployment that you created.
Yeah, I understood.
Oh, sorry, I've been muted. Does anybody want to provide an executive summary here? On this issue, Tim, it seems like you had kind of brought it up on chat.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to talk about it. I think there's a couple different directions. Seems like Joe's also been talking, and then I think I saw a comment from Aoki, but oh, sorry, I realized what you're asking. You're about a summary. Sorry, I'm in too many different Slack conversations. Yeah, I guess one of the questions came up was with the new Helm chart provisioner, does it make sense to leverage some of the capabilities there, maintain a Helm chart to keep RuckPack up to date, and use RuckPack APIs to keep RuckPack up to date? There's been a problem before, but I think with the Helm chart stuff, it's been opened as an issue and might be a viable thing. I think a couple of things we've thought about so far is one, introducing the Helm chart, and two, Joe had outlined, maybe this is agnostic to bundle format and we can solve this in some other way. Probably missing some other stuff, but I think that's the general detail. I'm curious if other people have opinions about how we could do this.
I think one of the takeaways I have is that no matter how you cut it, like unless the RuckPack API defines a labeling and like ownership strategy at that level, whatever we want to do for like orphaning or inheriting existing objects under a bundle deployment is going to be provisioner specific, right? Like the Helm provisioner creates a Helm secret and does a bunch of stuff and puts a bunch of labels, and you end up with something that has Helm on it. The plane provisioner, it does that right now, but that might not be the way that it always does it. So it really kind of depends on how the provisioner decides it's going to manage ownership of the things that it manages. So I kind of maybe would say like, well, right now the ownership is based on, I guess you could say it's based on owner reps. But like Helm has this extra thing where it won't install, something over an existing resource that's already there if it doesn't have the expected labels that Helm puts on there. But obviously we wouldn't have come up with that same exact scheme for the plane provisioner. So like, there's no way that like we can generically say like, oh, well, here's how you bootstrap Ruckpack. It doesn't matter what the format is, I guess is my point. So I wonder if maybe it doesn't really matter if we have any implementation specific stuff under the hood, because our bootstrap will change if we ever want to change the format of how we distribute Ruckpack as a bundle. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I think I'm missing a little bit of context, but basically there seems to be, we have a Helm install for Ruckpack right now, or
No.
we're thinking about moving to that, or what's the current way of installing Ruckpack? Just applying the manifest?
Yeah. So there's no Ruckpack managed Ruckpack right now. So I think what this is asking is like, okay, how do I keep Ruckpack up to date? And the way that you do that today is you just go and reapply the Ruckpack install YAML. And we probably have to think about it a little bit more, because if we ever want to remove something or change the name of something, it's not just as simple as just kubectl apply over and over and over again. So what I was kind of hinting at here is like, well, maybe we should have that initial install process just do the thing that we do right now, which is kubectl apply. But then like once all of those objects are laid down on the cluster, is it possible, and we have to add new features for this, but is it possible to create a bundle deployment that would put down those exact same resources? And the way that the provisioner would see that is it's like, oh, those resources are already there. I've got nothing to do, but now I own them all. And then at that point, then you've got a Ruckpack installation that's managed by a bundle deployment. And then from then on, you could say, okay, well, I want to upgrade Ruckpack, so I'm just going to change this bundle deployment to point to a new image of the Ruckpack bundle. And then the existing version of the plane provisioner would see that and redeploy Ruckpack, which would kill itself, which gets pretty interesting in terms of like when exactly that happens and how do you control the handoff and that kind of stuff. But I think it's an interesting problem for us to think about, because I think that would have a lot of nice properties.
Okay, I see. So manual
not
install
supported?
first.
Oh, my bad, Alex, go ahead.
No, you can go to.
I was gonna say, so a couple things. One, I'm pretty sure we've been pretty liberal around breaking changes. So I don't think we've ever really thought, providing these install manifests and here's the way you install Ruckpack right now is going to be a long-term strategy. It's just something that's worked and produced pretty little friction. So the upgrade workflow, I don't think we've invested quite a bit in. Maybe that's something we can start. But in terms of like, isn't that a supported feature in deployments, being able to adopt other deployment resources? I could have sworn when we were building out the bundle deployment initial dynamic templating. Oh man, it's been a while. Management of bundles, nested bundles, Pierre. That was something I had seen in deployments. It was maybe a potential follow-up tracker. I think that's what you were kind of talking about, Joe. If I was hearing that right.
And this boils down to, so I haven't actually tried it, but I would be pretty surprised if we could go and, I think it would be possible right now to go in and twiddle all of the Ruckpack resources to make them look like they were a member of a Helm thing such that if you created a bundle deployment that referenced a bundle that had the same exact resources in it, you could get the plane provisioner to believe that it was something it was managing, but like that would require a lot of fiddling. So I don't think we support, inheriting existing resources today. If that's what you were asking. I do think though that that's something we're going to have to tackle. There was another conversation I was in, and Tim was there too this morning, where there's another use case for basically like bootstrapping other things that aren't RuckPack itself, such that RuckPack can inherit those things after the fact. So I think like regardless of whether it's RuckPack bootstrapping itself or it's RuckPack just inheriting some other resources that are on the cluster such that you can begin receiving upgrades of those, like it seems like we need an answer to, okay, how does that work?
Okay, so for this ticket, do we want, I can reference, kind of this comment that you had made earlier, Joe, and just mention that we're like going forward, we're going to first investigate whether or not we can create a generic way for RuckPack to inherit resources that didn't necessarily create, right? Like that's basically what we want to kick off with.
I think I think that's the first thing we have to solve if we want to do what I was suggesting earlier. Although now that I'm reading the title of this, it's like we don't necessarily have to use RuckPack to update RuckPack. I don't know if that's what was being suggested in the original issue, but
he provided a few options, like using a helm
yeah.
provisioner or a registry provisioner or a plane provisioner. I don't think there's, I think defining an upgrade strategy is certainly something we want to do, right?
I actually don't even know if we need to, but it might just be worth letting this one sit for a bit and see if there's any cool ideas that come out of it. I mean, I don't know. It's always nice to see the RuckPack using RuckPack or Depping using RuckPack use cases.
Yeah, I think
I was going to say maybe we should spin off a separate issue that's focused, if we don't have one already, that's focused just on doing that. RuckPack can inherit resources that already exist feature.
And just to clarify, Joe, is that for, let's say I install something through OLM today. Are you talking about, oh, I have this CSV resource that I'd be adopting, or are you talking I have this current bundle deployment on the cluster, I'm going to create a bundle deployment that can adopt or inherit those bundle deployments?
I'm mainly talking about like, say you've got a deployment and a service and a secret and an ingress, and you want those to stay in place, but you want to start having those be managed by RuckPack. So you need to create a bundle deployment, but you don't want those to change at all when you put it under RuckPack management. And then as soon as you've got it under RuckPack management, you want RuckPack to start reconciling that. And then, maybe it changes because it doesn't quite match the bundle that was referenced by the, the bundle deployment. But then from then on, then you can start upgrading it with RuckPack. So I'm thinking of just like arbitrary resources on the cluster that RuckPack doesn't know about.
So I started a thread about this, maybe on the internal one earlier today, because I was thinking the same thing. It feels like a natural thing we should support or try to support, although, the Helm stuff is a bit unfortunate. Feels like that should have a opt-in, opt-out toggle, like let the admin make the decision there, but should probably stop before I go into a rant.
My guess is that we can really easily instrument that that inheritance in our code. Like I don't think it would be all that difficult even to just adhere to what Helm is expecting. So like, yeah, it's a little unfortunate because we have to do what Helm does, but we also get the benefit of all of the protection logic and stuff that Helm already has for us out of the box. So it's kind of a you win some, you lose some situation.
Yeah, I mean, it just introduces complexity into the controllers.
Yeah.
But if that's the cost to pay for something that could be potentially powerful, then so.
I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't just totally ditch the Helm libraries from the plain provisioner and roll our own. I think it's just like a cost benefit analysis. And for all I know, like there might be, I'm sure there are controllers out there that you can just feed in YAML and it'll start managing it, right? So it might be worth a little spike effort to see what other options exist for managing static YAML.
So Alex, I think there's a couple different things we talked about here. It sounded like what you're writing up was one thing, and then we might even have like a reevaluate Helm under the hood style ticket.
Yeah, so on the ticket that we were looking at, I just commented that, hey, we looked at this in the upstream meeting. We agree that there needs to be an upgrade strategy for RuckBack, right? And then I just mentioned that we don't want to like direct the community one way or another just yet. So keep the suggestions coming in. Like basically saying, yeah, we recognize this is something we need to improve and actually have an official pipeline for, right? But we haven't landed on a solution yet. And then I was creating a new ticket here for, Joe had asked to track RuckPack being able to inherit resources. If possible, I would just like to know the only context I have for this problem is from the conversation we just had in that ticket, and I don't understand all the other use cases. So if I could just have a good summary of what we want to capture here, that would be super helpful to me.
Sorry, Alex, were you asking me to help?
Yeah, if you could just so you had mentioned that you wanted to create a ticket that captures like RuckPack inheriting resources, and I don't understand any of the scenarios that we even want to support with that. Or
Yeah, so I think the main scenario is, you've got, I think the use case is I'm a cluster admin, I manually kubectl applied an app, and now I realize that there's a RuckPack bundle for my app and I want to join the RuckPack ecosystem without destroying my app and restarting. So therefore I need a way to tell RuckPack, rather than having a conflict because you see these resources that already exist, just inherit them and then start managing them. And I think that should only work if they're not already being managed by RuckPack. We might need a separate story for transferring ownership between bundle deployments. But I guess the reason I say that is I don't want to get into a situation where we say, oh yeah, 2 different bundle deployments can own the same CRD, right? There has to be a handoff somehow that's obvious to a cluster admin.
okay, so I used owned here. Are these labels like the owner's label? I don't want to use Owned
I
is
think
kind of an
owned is
overloaded
fine.
term. Okay.
Yeah, it's not necessarily just owner references, but the implication is that there's only one parent thing that is allowed to manage and control the underlying stuff.
Okay, if they were not installed due to a separate bundle deployment, that's probably a better capture of it, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds fine.
Okay.
And then I guess there's another, maybe this is getting into the weeds and more out of scope, but there's the opposite, which is I want to orphan these things. Like I want to be able to delete a bundle deployment without deleting the other stuff, which maybe is just kubectl delete dash dash whatever, like deletion cascade equals orphan, and maybe that's all you have to do. But it might be nice. I don't know if I have a user story for that, and I think there's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want that to happen. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's not worth capturing that right now.
I like the idea that we're creating more issues during OLM issue triage.
Yeah, that may not be like traditional, but I don't know. I think it's useful. The way I look at issue triage is that we're actually critically evaluating the issues that we have, right? And like making sure that as stuff pops up that we're capturing the work. So I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be doing issue generation, but I think it's useful when we have, you know, a bunch of people here and we're thinking about things critically to capture real use cases that we might want to support. But if anybody else wants to lead this meeting, they can do it differently if they choose to.
You're doing a good job, dude. I was just messing around.
I know, Tim. It's all good. Okay, investigate whether or not we should allow people. That's funny. We should. Rock Pack should support. I think that's fair. I don't know why I put a space here. And I'm just going to immediately throw this in the backlog because it seems pretty well scoped. Okie dokie. Yeah, but on a more serious note, if any of these upstream meetings, if people want the focus to be changed, just reach out to me and I'll try and do my best to incorporate anything. Any suggested changes. Okay, cool. Add provisioner. Oh, Tim, this one you created. This seems fine.
Yeah, this is a good first issue, and it's like actual definition. It's basically just adding a markdown line and linking to a nested directory.
Got it. Okay, cool. We'll just skip that one. Support syncing get-based sources.
So is this saying that we should, if we have a tag or branch reference that we should basically reconcile over time, and if the tag or branch moves, then we should update the bundle contents for that bundle?
I think so. It sounds like it's almost like a GitOps flow for Git based bundles.
Yeah, Dan had sent me a DM maybe last week about this, and I just told him to create an issue. I don't think he's on right now, but I think we said Tyler's the right read.
Gotcha.
I thought we had basically said that like bundles, once they're unpacked, you know, we're basically never going to unpack them again on purpose, which is the same sort of behavior that deployments have with container images, right? Where like, if you say, you know, create a deployment with pod : latest, that like the deployment controller doesn't just watch the latest tag and say, oh, latest update, I'm going to go and redeploy your pod for you anytime latest changes. So I thought we were basically going to say the same thing about bundle deployments. Like the only way that you get a new instance of your bundle is by specifically asking for a different, you know, making some sort of change on the bundle deployment that triggers a new rollout of the bundle, rather than some sort of automated process that reconciles, sees the change, rolls it out without a cluster admin doing something.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would be fine with keeping this to like Argo CD managing this type of interaction. And instead, we just kind of are immutable when it comes to bundle deployments. If you want to create a new one or have it auto update, you would have to manage that yourself. But I mean, I guess I could be convinced that of the value of us being able to just something in this bundle deployment spec say, hey, keep this up to date always. But I don't know, there's some implications there as well.
Is this something we'd expect to be encoded in like a conformance test? It doesn't seem like I wouldn't be surprised if a provisioner, like an individual provisioner implementation, tried to encode this logic instead of delegating it to a third-party tool like Argo.
That's true. Yeah, so I guess the question is like, should we make it part of the spec that you shall not resync this kind of thing, or is it implementation specific? I don't know if I've thought enough about that.
I think it would be nice. Like, do we have like generic documentation for provisioners? Because I could certainly see, like, if I was new to this ecosystem and I wanted to get involved and I wanted to make a Git provisioner, I don't think I would logically assume that the bundle, once unpacked, never changes. So do we have that documented, and do we have steps available to kind of outline how provisioners should be written?
We have some. They're probably not exhaustive. And I don't remember. I know we have docs that kind of generally talk about like bundles are immutable, but that's only like thinking about it now and with this conversation. Clearly, the only reason they're immutable in this sense is because the provisioners don't try to re-unpack them. So I think that's more of it's not something that's super easy to enforce.
I know that Aki is working on creating Helm to look like an out of tree provisioner and kind of what that would look like. I think a lot of the like documentation around how we do out of tree provisioners or custom ones could probably come out of that. I think, yeah, like you said, Joe, like we have some, but like nothing too exhaustive. So, but I mean, what would we do? We need to add something to the spec, or could we just say like, hey, if you want to have custom options set, you would have to define that with annotations or labels for external provisioners? Because it sounds like we're muddying up our spec for potential, like what if somebody else wants the custom value for the spec in the future that's unrelated to this? Like, do we just keep adding to that spec? How do custom provisioners kind of add custom logic, I guess is a question I have.
So Aki added a config spec.config field to the bundle deployment. So at least now a bundle deployment provisioner can, and it's like a map string interface, I think, or maybe it's just raw interface directly, I can't remember. But basically now, like, the provisioner can use whatever it wants out of there. So like for the Helm provisioner case, we stuffed a bunch of values.yaml in there, and that's like very Helm specific. So the next provisioner that come along could define some other thing that it wants to put there.
Nice.
I do
That's
think
awesome. That sounds perfect.
I wonder whether it's just like best practice for core RuckPack controllers, or whether this is something that actually need to live in the spec. Because I think I tend to agree with Alex that I would find this behavior confusing if I was bootstrapping my own provisioner.
You would
But
find,
that said, if we do require that like storage URL as part of a core spec guarantee, then maybe this doesn't fall under best practice and might need to be encoded. I just don't, it seems like it would be difficult to enforce.
yeah, I would be in favor of writing it in the spec as if it's required. Like you cannot resync a bundle source that has already been successfully unpacked. Or at least like it should never resolve to a different underlying hash or something. And then like, yeah, maybe we can't enforce it, but if later some provisioner does something, we can say, oh, well, you know, the spec says this, and that's a bug effectively, rather than if we just leave it out or say it's a best practice, then we've left wiggle room. If, you know, maybe we want to leave wiggle room, and that's okay, but if we don't think we should, then we should at least write it down, even if we can't enforce it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of like starting constrained by saying like this is what we support or don't support. If it could be codified when we don't support something, that'd be nice. But I'm hesitant to even venture down that path. That doesn't seem like a huge value add, and I don't know how you do it. But the one thing that's like in this very specific scenario, if they're just saying like, oh, if the source changes, I want the existing stuff on the cluster to be updated, like that can be handled pretty easily just by looking at the SHA of the commit, right? So like if it changed, for the tag, like create a new bundle and then just migrate to the new bundle. And that's like that's a valid upgrade flow. And I don't think, you need to mutate an existing bundle in order to do that. So that constraint that we were talking about where bundles are treated as immutable objects, I don't think prohibits this kind of behavior. It just slightly changes the story, right?
Yeah, but I guess the question is like, do we want a provisioner to proactively poll Git repos to see if the source.spec.get or spec.source.get.branch is that a new commit? And if it is, trigger a new unpack, which then triggers a new bundle deployment, all without the cluster admin changing anything. So I guess my point is like, that's perfectly reasonable behavior that someone might want. And I would probably say you should build a like GitHub webhook thing that goes and kubectl applies a new bundle deployment that references that new SHA, right? So it's like, which side of is it going to be a push into the cluster when like, if there's some Git thing that happens, are you going to run some GitHub action that runs kubectl apply and update the bundle deployment to reference the new SHA? Or are you going to have the on cluster component polling the Git repo all the time to see if a new SHA exists? And I would advocate that we explicitly put in the spec that you should not poll and you should declaratively have an updated bundle deployment that references the new thing.
Yeah, I thank you for explaining that, Joe. I agree. I don't like the idea of something called a provisioner getting into the weeds of like, oh, now I create the content that I provisioned to.
Another thing, not to make this go even longer, how would this even interface with approval?
Right.
Well, I think in the proposed it was optionally, right? So
So I mean, if we have stuff where we can say like this isn't just a if we're promoting it from a best practice to provisioner spec, I think it's sufficient to say this is the reason why. Although I don't know, I just tend to think like you should give admins the ability to do stuff.
I think
Yeah, I guess what is the admin not able to do?
Yeah, I mean that's fair, right? Like they could just delegate to GitOps or Git webhook or I don't know what the container image equivalent would be there, but I'm sure there's some sort of automated component.
And the third
Maybe
option is
the
being
use
able to
case is
build
a
out
bit
your
watered
custom
down.
provisioner, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm proposing is that if you build a custom provisioner and we have something in our provisioner spec that says provisioners shall not resync unpacked sources, then they violated the spec with that custom provisioner. There's nothing that would explicitly prevent someone from doing that, but it would still be a spec violation, is my proposal. You know.
Do we support that workflow in terms of like this gets downstream and then there's a bug with it because they did the git sync? Do we support that, or do you say, hey, no, we don't support that kind of thing?
Well, if it was a custom provisioner, that's not on us to worry about.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that this isn't something that'd be in our core controllers, core provisioners, whatever that means long
Yeah.
term.
so. I'm gonna basically just mention that it's on us to provide provisioners with a best practice document. I called out that historically we've treated bundles as immutable resources, but this isn't codified. And then I'm just going to mention that like there isn't really a way for us to prevent a provisioner from doing this, but in general, we would suggest that provisioners don't watch, sync, and update bundles, right?
We can work on the wording, but I think that's generally it. The other thing here is like, it is codified that bundles are immutable. You cannot change the spec of a bundle because we have a validating webhook. The problem is if the bundle spec refers to a branch or a tag, we don't control whether the Git repo changes what that branch or tag points to. So you can theoretically change the bundle content out from under a bundles resource without changing its spec. And so I think what I'm trying to convey is that it kind of violates the spirit of the immutable rule by saying, oh, well, okay, I'll just like make that mutation somewhere else and then write my provisioner to go and look somewhere else for that change. And then for that last bullet, I'm still saying like, I think we should make a stronger statement that says provisioners just shall not do this, rather than a best practice kind of thing. But if people disagree, we can have that debate. There's probably some use cases where maybe you'd want to do it, but I can't think of any.
I see. Okay, so, oops, sorry. So, okay, let me just think how I want to word this. So we reviewed it. And we said we need to provide a best practice doc. Ruckpack has treated bundles as immutable resources to the spec in this instance. In this instance, the bundle.spec would point to a tag and the provisioner would pull for a change. Change and modify deployed content based on changes to the get tag. This introduces some issues. This could introduce issues where a cluster admin approved a set of resources, a bundle, approved a bundle, only to have the scope of the approved resources expanded due to a change in the repository. As such, we highly I think that captures everything, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds good, Alex.
Cool.
So I know we've only got 3 minutes left, but one issue I was hoping we could talk about is the one about Go API diff. Let me see if I can find it.
What's the, in the context is what, Aki's exporting PRs?
Yeah. So essentially, we are talking about supporting third-party out-of-tree provisioners, and if we're going to do that, we probably want to export some libraries that are. Hold on, sorry. All right, there we go. Export some libraries that provisioners would use, and if we do that, then I think we want to have a signal for when we break those libraries. So a long time ago, really early on, I opened an issue about adding the Go API diff check as an optional thing. That'll just, if we make a breaking change, it'll fail the check, but then we can look at it and say, oh, okay, yeah, we intended to do that. So like, great. So anyway, I was kind of hoping that we could reopen that discussion and get that merged before we actually make anything exported, so that we always know when we're going to make a breaking change. It's number 54. Sorry, Alex.
Okay, I see. So I'm just gonna, I mean, I have no major problem with this. I'm just gonna call a read.
Yeah, my only hesitation is if it slowed down developer productivity, but if it's an optional check and we're comfortable with making breaking changes in the interim, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, totally. I think we absolutely want to keep making breaking changes. And I think the main thing I want to have is visibility when breaking changes happen. So we can say like, oh yeah, like that's exactly the breaking change we wanted to make.
Okay.
So yeah, totally optional. It's just a visibility thing.
We call it a non-blocking test. Yeah, promotes visibility to breaking API changes. Yeah. Okay.
One super quick, one really quick thing. Do we have like reviewer guidelines? Would something like this need to propagate its way down? Maybe we can talk about this in Slack and not keep this meeting longer.
Wait, can you sorry, what do you mean reviewer guidelines?
maintainer, reviewer guidelines, if you're making a breaking change, maybe review the Go API diff. We can just talk about this in Slack, Alex. My bad.
Oh, no. Well, at a very high level, I think we should, fall back December rules. So if you break an API or you remove an API, that's a bump. But yeah, that's kind of my thought.
Can we put this in the, I don't know, how long do we have until we want to do a 0.9 release?
I mean, I was tempted to even cut it today, but I was thinking the same thing. Just throw this in the 0.9 release.
If you're going to do a 0.9 today, then put it in 0.10.
No, we get some time.
Okay.
Unless somebody's really wants a sum chart provisioner.
Cool. I'll do this. This looks like an easy, fun thing to do. Okay. I will try and do this shortly. All right, on that note, I think that's everything we have time for. So we'll meet again next week at the OLM working group meeting. Thank you everybody for being here, and we'll talk again next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, Alex.